Well, hi Year 10 Business Studies students, and welcome to topic number 4 in our GCSE course. We're going to begin to study human resources. Having studied the first 3 topics already, we're doing very well. We're now more than halfway through the GCSE. Things are going well, so we're now going to look at the human resources topic. What you'll need for this PowerPoint presentation is you will need some paper, lined and blank if you have it, obviously a pen, ruler, you can use a computer or your laptop, and you'll also need your section 4 reading resource. You should have a photocopy of it. If not, I've scanned the first section on human resources into the closure work file. You'll find that on 365. So that I can clearly see that you have understood what you need to learn, please send me your notes and tasks by email or put it on the hand-in area on 365. I'd like to see everything, please. There may be some things in this PowerPoint that you will need to photograph on your phones and just email to me, and other documents you can upload to 365. Okay, so let's kick off. We've got to answer a question. What is human resources? What do you already know about the functions and activities of a human resource department? Have a little think about that. I'm going to ask you to pause the presentation in a moment and just jot down your ideas on a piece of paper. What you could also do is talk to people around you at home and ask them what human resources is all about, what it means to them, what interactions and experience do they have of working with or in conjunction with a human resource department in the organisations for which they've worked. You might find out some quite interesting things. So what I suggest is pause the presentation now and have a little chat with the people around you, and also jot down your ideas of what you think the human resources department is all about. So what did you come up with? For me, there's a really important fundamental point about the Human Resources Department and how important it is. The fact is, businesses employ people, and it's often said that the employees of a business are its most valuable asset. It's also true that paying wages and salaries is often the biggest cost that a business faces. And here I've got a question for you, actually a couple of questions, and wonder if you can answer these questions. If you think about Reefham High School and College, try to guess how much money it costs to run Reefham High School and College for 1 year. And that's spending all the money it spends on all the things it buys, all the things it purchases. So, for example, it's keeping the grass cut, maintaining the windows, paying the electricity bill, buying the heating oil, buying resources for you guys like pens and pencils and things like that, but also paying the people who work in the school. Have a little think about that and try and come up with a number. Okay, if I was to tell you that Reefham High School spends about £7 million a year on running the school, think about the number that you came up with and decide how close you were. But then do something even more important than that. Of that £7 million, try to guess now how much of that money goes on the wages and salaries of staff. And that's all of the teaching staff, all of the support staff, the fantastic administration staff that we have, all the guys who keep the buildings in such good condition, the maintenance team. How much of that £7 million is spent on paying staff? Have a little think about it, try and come up with a number. Okay, of the £7 million that the school spends every year, approximately £5 million of that money goes on paying the staff. So it's getting on for nearly 70% of everything we spend at Reefham High School and College goes on paying members of staff. So you can see how important human resources are. We've got to get fantastic people which I think we're successful in doing at Reefham High School, and we've got to motivate them and drive them to ensure that they deliver a fantastic level of education for you guys. And again, I think at Reefham High School we're very good at that. But the importance of the staff is really emphasised by the fact that about 70% of the money we spend every year goes on paying those staff. So human resources is really, really important. But human resources does some other things too, and on the next slide we'll look at some of the other things that HR does. Fundamentally, human resources is all about establishing the structure of a business. Businesses have structures, and those structures need to be designed, just like products need to be designed. The structure of an organisation needs to be designed. And so in that design, the senior leaders of an organisation are deciding what jobs need to be done, who should do those jobs, the skills and experience and training required. How should those jobs be designed to ensure that those individuals who occupy those jobs know exactly what they have to do within the organisation? Who are the bosses? Who are the workers? Who reports to who? How can the right people be found? That is, of course, recruitment and selection. What do the future workforce needs of the organisation look like? So we're not just thinking about what the organisation needs to look like today, but we're thinking maybe 3 or 5 years ahead and deciding how things are going to change, and what people we need in what jobs, what the structure of the organisation needs to look like. Of course, the Human Resources Department gets involved with problems and issues. If there's, for example, staff absenteeism, or sometimes we have issues with worker behaviour, then the Human Resources Department is responsible for that. And finally, how does the business motivate its workforce to work hard? Fact is, happy workers are much more productive. So the question is, how does the Human Resources Department motivate those workers, keep them happy, keep them enthusiastic, and keep them delivering a fantastic level of service to the organisation? So whether you are a manager in a business or you decide to run your own business one day, you will be dealing with human resource issues. So this is what we're going to look at over the next couple of weeks. We're going to look at organisational structures. We're doing that today. Then we're going to go on to look at recruitment and selection of employees, and then motivating employees, and then we'll look at the training of employees. Mr. Hill and I are sharing this work. I'm going to do the first 2 sections there, organisational structures and recruitment and selection, and Mr. Hill is going to cover motivating employees and training. So what I'm going to do in this lesson particularly is the areas highlighted in yellow there. We're going to look at why businesses have organisational structures and the importance of them, and we're going to look at the different job roles and responsibilities within an organisation. Okay, so let's start by thinking about organisational structures. Businesses, all organisations in fact, need to be designed. The structure of the organisation doesn't just happen by accident. So here's a question for you. Think about your school and ask yourself this: who is responsible for designing the structure of the organisation? I'm sure you came up with this answer. Mr. Gibbs and his colleagues on the senior leadership team are responsible for designing the structure of Reefham High School. So that's thinking about what jobs are required to deliver the education that we deliver to you guys, and it's thinking about who needs to occupy those jobs, who reports to who is responsible for what, how do we divide up the responsibilities within the school. What you see on the screen now is a typical organisational chart, sometimes called an organisational tree. Mr. Gibbs and the SLT decide on what jobs are needed, who reports to who, and so on. And these decisions are shown in the organisational chart. And here is a typical example. This one is for a business actually, and what you see is at the top of the organisational chart you have a director. In a school we would call that a member of the SLT, the senior leadership team. And in this particular case, reporting to a director, we have a number of managers. There's a marketing manager, finance manager, human resources manager, and operations manager. And here I've just shown the structure of one department. I've shown the structure of the marketing department. So the marketing manager has a sales supervisor, a promotions manager, and an overseas sales manager reporting to them. And each of those supervisors and middle managers have assistants. So, for example, the sales supervisor has 3 assistants reporting to that individual, that person. This is very much a simplified organisational chart because I've only shown one department here, but all of the other departments are going to have a similar structure to the marketing department. So there will be a finance department, HR department, and operations department, and those would be equally as complicated as the marketing department there. But obviously I've only shown one department here because showing the whole organisation would become very, very complex. So here's a task for you. What I'd like you to do is get a blank piece of paper, or use a computer if you wish, and try to draw the organisational chart for Reefham High School and College. Try to decide who reports to who and put the most senior people at the top. Your organisational chart should look a bit like the one on the previous slide. And if you need a little bit of help, look at the next slide. So try to include in your organisational chart these individuals. I'm sure you can think of more, but we've got the head teacher, deputy head, assistant head, head of department, teachers, SEN support staff, the school business manager, learning support staff, admin, maintenance, SEN, and pastoral care. But I'm sure you can think of more. And try to draw out the organisational chart for Reefham High School and College. Once you've done that, I'd very much like to see it, so you could either photograph it on your phone, or if you're doing it on a computer, you could save that file and upload it to Office 365 for me. So pause the presentation now and try and carry out that task. Okay, your next task is reading and note-taking. Please read and take notes from pages 163 to 167 of your textbook resource, section 4 on human resources. I have uploaded that to the closure work file on 365. I scanned it, but we're also now working on getting that to you in a different form via a direct internet link to the publisher of the book. And I'm hoping to be able to communicate that to you in the next day or two. Please make sure you understand the key terms on the slide. You will be tested on these when you come back to school in September, so we're going to have a test on key terms to make sure you can remember those things because they're very important. And these are some of the key terms that you will need to know and learn: span of control, levels of hierarchy, chain of command, delayering and delegation. And what I've done for you is I've defined those key terms on the next 2 slides. So what I suggest you do is jot them down in your notes, but also make sure you learn them. There's some of the key terms that you need to know, defined for you. And there's some additional key terms that you will also require. Okay, just a little final task before I set your homework for you. Task 3 then is imagine that there are 5 roles within an organisation, and I've given you 5 roles in a typical business: the chief executive, shop floor workers, managers, team leaders and directors. And what you need to do is this: give 2 examples of the responsibilities that each of those people would have. Okay, so you need to give me 2 examples of the responsibilities of the chief executive. What would the chief executive do? Give me 2 examples of the kind of responsibilities a shop floor worker would have, etc. Okay, so try and think about what these people do and give 2 examples for each person. And then finally, draw an organisational chart to show where each of them belongs, show clearly who is responsible to who, in other words, the line management responsibilities. Task 4 is a small writing task. On page 167 there is just a very short business insights case study entitled Delayering at Boots UK. Having read that page, really think about delayering, think about the benefits and drawbacks of delayering, the good things and the bad things, and try to answer that question, and we'll say a little bit more about that when we go through levels in the hierarchy in the next PowerPoint presentation after this one. And finally, just a few quick questions to consolidate your learning, to make sure you understand what you've read and what you've gone through in this presentation. So question 1 is, why do we have an organisational structure? Try and jot down some ideas and think about what the answer would be to that. Secondly, what is a line manager? And thirdly, explain one benefit of delayering. And you should have got that from your reading of page 167 and your answering of Boots' case study. So have a go at those and think about consolidating your learning. I'll talk to you again next week.